Hello there, and welcome to Lesson 2 on this series on Unity for Beginners, created for the students at Saturday Academy. I am Will Batillo, the instructor for this course, and today's lesson is going to be focused on creating a character controller using the controller provided by Unity's standard assets. I'm going to start out by going, up in my top level assets folder, go into standard assets, and look for characters. And just because it's a bit simpler, I'm going to start out with this first-person character and open up prefabs. And I'm going to go with this rigid body first-person controller prefab and just drop that into the scene right there and bring it up a little bit so that it's not inside the ground. So you'll see this little green outline of a capsule with a kind of opening box coming out of its head. This white wireframe here is actually the camera. This whole bit is the character itself. So let's just start out by seeing what happens when we run. Oh, actually, before that, I'll need to delete this main camera that was in the scene to start. Alright, so because you should only have one camera in the scene at a time, because otherwise what's going to get drawn to the screen? So save that and run. And right now, right off the bat, I have this character that I can press the forward, back, left, and right, and I can move around. I can also move my mouse to look up, look down, look left, look right. That's just all mouse movement causes me to turn, and I can wander around my scene, just like this. And there are a lot of features built into this. So right now I'm not seeing my mouse because it's currently being used to track movement. If I hit the escape key, then the mouse will show up, and I can use it to click on other things. So if I want to mess around with some settings, on this main camera, you can see the head bob right there. If you're finding the head bob is making you a little nauseous, or you just think it's a silly effect, you can set those to 0, and now you'll have a little less of that. Or I can set those back. And there's a lot of other settings you can mess with, either in that bobbing effect, also in my movement settings. So this is up on the rigid body FPS controller, rigid body first-person controller. I can also set my speed going at various different directions. So if I want to half my speeds, I could just set it like that. And now I'm moving at a slower pace. And then there's also a run key, which is currently set to left shift. If I press that, now I move faster by a factor of 2. If I can make run more dramatic by changing the run multiplier, and now when I hold left shift I go faster. It's a much bigger difference. And then one other good thing to know about is if I want to change which key is running, right now it's left shift. Say I want to change that to right shift, I can just bring down that drop down and just keep hitting the R key until I see the one that I want. And yes, there it is. So now right shift I can use to run instead of left shift. There's also settings relating to the mouse sensitivity, and all kinds of other things that you can just mess around with. One thing to note, any changes that you make while the game is running are not going to affect, are just going to be lost once you stop the game. So notice how I just changed these speeds. If I stop the game, it goes right back. Whenever I hit play, my screen gets slightly greenish. That may not be happening for you. And to get that to happen, just go into File, Edit, and Preferences, and then in Colors, expand this out, look for Play Mode Tint. And just set that to some kind of light, subtle color, that whatever you like. I kind of like a light green, so that way all this background looks different when you're in play and not in play mode. I don't actually want a first-person controller. I prefer a third-person for this game, partly because it's going to illustrate a few more concepts than the first-person controller does. Also, I've kind of always liked that view in games, to be kind of the camera behind the player and up a little bit. It's the view is inherently a little too narrow in games, so your peripheral vision isn't as good as it is in real life, and that third-person view is a good way to kind of give your player a chance to see to their sides a little better. So anyway, back in standard assets, characters, third person, look for prefabs, and what you want is the third person controller.prefab. And I'll just bring this into the scene. I'm going to go ahead and just put them near my water and put them right there. And now you have this little character right here. This is Ethan, who comes with Unity as a built-in thing. And so, alright, there I have my third-person controller. Now, if I run this, there's going to be a problem. No camera is rendering. That's because I deleted my camera a minute ago. Well, that's fine. I'll just bring it back. I'll just right-click in this empty space, or I could also click Game Object and look for Camera, and there I have a camera once again. And bring it up and move it back behind Ethan over here. Right, so now when I hit play, now when I press the arrow keys, Ethan runs around, and where I press controls where he goes. However, it's very easy for him to just go off the camera because my camera isn't moving to follow him. Now, typically, the way you would solve this is you just take the camera and just make it a child of the thing that's moving so that it would automatically follow. And my camera is following, but I'm having this weird effect where if I go to the left and then turn, my character just turns back to some other direction. And the reason for that, what's actually going on right now, is that the forward arrow key always moves me a particular direction in world space, and my left arrow key always moves me perpendicular to that. Right arrow key the other direction. Back is the opposite of forward. These are tied to world space, and they will always point the same direction, and it doesn't really matter where the camera is. Ethan's not responding to that. He's actually acting exactly the same as before, except my camera's following. So the way I deal with that is there's actually another component or another prefab in this third-person character controller that I need to look for. So if I just go into this little box right here with a magnifying glass and I look up rig, want this multi-purpose camera rig prefab. And actually, if I want to navigate to where this is, I click on that and then press the X, and then that shows me where this is. So this was in standard assets, cameras, prefabs, multi-purpose camera rig. Drag that into my scene, and this has a camera with it, so I can actually get rid of that other camera again. And for this one, it has this Autocam feature right down here, this component, and I drag in my third-person controller over there into the target, so that now this will follow whatever you have set to be the target. So now if I hit play, and I press the arrow keys, if I hold, right now I'm holding straight and Ethan's moving in that direction. If I press left, he turns to the left and just continues turning as long as I hold left pressed. And as soon as I let go of it and continue holding straight, then he's moving in that new direction. If I just keep turning, then he's gonna. If I just press right, we'll run around in a circle. Back turns him around, and actually also causes them to run in a circle. But anyway, now the camera is actually following Ethan and responding to changes in direction, which is not 100% intuitive, but a lot better than it was. So one thing also you may have noticed is when I hit play, the camera starts in this really weird location down here and then moves up to where I want it. To get rid of that, the reason for it is because the camera rig is actually starting way down here at 0, 0, 0, and hey, my terrain's all the way up there. And so it's moving to follow the main character, but it's starting very far away, and so it's having to zip over there at first. So to get the camera rig started in the right place, a trick I like to use is I just make it a child of the thing I want it to follow, and it's not going to let me do that because of this new prefab system doesn't totally have all the kinks worked out. So I'm just going to click on this third-person controller, right-click, and unpack prefab. Alright, that'll make that little error message go away. Now I can put the camera rig as a child of it, and now set the transform position to 0, 0, 0. That will set the camera rig right here, which right now is at its feet. I'm going to move this back over to around there and give it a nice, more reasonable starting position. But I don't actually want this to be a child of the third-person controller, so now that it's there, I can just drag it out. Now it's back where it was, but now it has a position that's more aligned with that object. So now, when I hit play, it's not there 100%, but it's much closer. And I can continue fine-tuning that if I wanted to. Now, the next thing here is that it's starting from kind of a long ways back. I'd like to have my camera a little closer in, and maybe this is fine for you, but it's good to at least know how you would change this point of view. So stop running here. If you look here on the second level for pivot, this is the thing that needs to change. So camera rig, and bring it down over here. So the pivot is currently set 2 up and 3 back from its target. I'm going to lower this down to 1 and negative 1.5. Let's just try that. And then I hit play. Now you'll see it's starting a little closer up. I'm going to adjust this a little bit more. Just so I can not have to constantly stop and start over again, I'm just going to make the changes in play mode. So I'll increase Y, let's see, 2.5, and then rotate downwards. So I'll just go on this X, and so I just click on the X where there's these little 2 arrows by my mouse, and I can just drag to the left and right to move continuously. Maybe something like this. Come down a little on my Y, and maybe get a little bit closer, down a little further. There, I kind of like that. And now, so that I keep these values, I click on this gear icon, say copy component, hit play, I'll lose them all, but then I can just click on the gear icon, paste component values, and it goes and saves to right where it was. Now I'm at a view that I personally like a little bit more in following this character. So now that I have my third-person character controller with the camera following it around, show some other features that come with this automatically. If I hit the space bar, a character will jump, and that's including if it's moving. If I press C, then they'll crouch, and they can actually still move while crouching. And then also pressing left shift, and he switches to walk. Kind of the opposite of the first-person character controller, where it starts out at a walk and then speeds up if you press left shift. Here, its shift slows down, and standard is to run. Now, let's suppose you want to change some of those inputs, or at least know where they're coming from. So all of this, the way this is built, is if you go into Edit, Project Settings, Input, you'll see the single field called Axes. Press the little arrow here to expand that. And this shows all the different inputs that the Unity's basic input system is listening to. And so here on horizontal, you can see that it has right, or this is the right mouse button, and also D are the positive button and the alternative positive button. And then left and A are the negative button and the alt negative button. So essentially this is just treating left and right as just being a positive one or a negative one or anywhere in between on a horizontal axis. A vertical is the same way, so down, up, and S and W, these are being the alternates. If you wanted to change these for whatever reason, so instead of WASD you wanted to have PFGH or something strange, then you could change those here, or you could even like remove things to get rid of the arrow keys if you hate left-handed people. And now next, besides these horizontal and vertical inputs, there's also here jump. Actually, jump shows up twice. So the first one, the positive button, is the space bar. So if you want jump to be something else, say like L, then you can just type that in there. Spaces makes a lot of sense though. Now this input system is cross-platform, which is why you'll see things like joystick button and other stuff. Now one thing you'll also notice that is not on here is crouch. And same goes for that toggle between walk and run. There isn't anything for crouch on here or for run mode. Now, maybe you're fine with left shift, or maybe you want it to be a different key entirely. In any case, it's useful to know how to change what key there is. And also, once we do this, that'll open up the possibility of, perhaps later down the line, allowing the player to change what key codes they use for these various controls. So for that, I'm going to, with these third-person controller selected, look for the third-person character script. It's third-person user control. So right here, this grayed out text, double-click on that, and it'll bring up the code for the character controller right here. And this is code written by Unity, so don't expect to understand all of this if you haven't worked with a lot of code before. This actually isn't too bad, but if you're new to programming, it's going to be a lot all at once. So just pay attention to what I'm adding. I'm only going to make a couple of little changes, and as long as you can follow along with those, then that's all you need. So let's start by typing in right up here below all these variables. I'm going to make some modifications to make this code work a little better. So the thing is, the reason that the keys weren't showing up on those input axes on the settings earlier is because they are hard-coded into the script. So right here under the, I think this is line 53 inside of the fixed update method, crouch, they're specifically looking for the C key code. And that's ridiculous, the hard-code specific values into programming. Never do this. And I can't believe Unity let this pass. So instead of having something hard-coded, we're going to actually expose this to the inspector and make it public so that we can change it to whatever we like. So for that, underneath these variables, I'm going to type in public key code, and I'm going to call this crouch key. So this is creating a variable of type key code, and public causes it both to be serialized, it's seen in the inspector window, and also accessible by other scripts. Right? We're only going to be using the serialized nature of it. That's what the public does. So now that we've created this variable, we can replace this keycode.c with crouch key. Now, if we save that code and then go back into the Unity editor and give it a moment, assuming there are no errors, if you type something in wrong, an error will show up in the console. And assuming there are no errors, this third-person control will change. And there will now be a new field right here where it says crouch key. And right now it says none. If I open this up and say I still wanted it to be C, I can just keep pressing C until that shows up. Now it'll work the same as before with C being the crouch key. I'm going to set mine to M because that is easier for me to reach with my right hand. Now when I press play and I press M, my character crouches, and now C does nothing. Okay. And next I'm going to do the same thing with the shift key. So if I look through here, I look for another input.get key, and yeah, here it is. In this walk speed multiplier, this is I think line 69, if input.get key, and again they've hard-coded a specific key right in the code, which you should never ever do. This is what I'm going to replace. So go back up here, public key code, and I want to call this walk key. Okay, and now copy that and paste it where it currently says keycode.leftShift. And now instead of it being a specific key, it's a variable of type key. And now save that and give the scene a moment to reload. And now there's a new field right here for walk key, and I'm going to set mine to right shift. There we go. And feel free to use whatever keys you like. You can use C and left shift if you really want to, or anything. So now if I press right shift, now that goes into walk mode, and M is crouch. And yeah, it's working as before, but I'm using different keys. And again, if I wanted to change what's jump and what's left and right, then that would be done through the edit, project settings, input, and a look at the appropriate axis, horizontal, vertical, and that first jump. Alright, so that's it for messing around with our movement. Next, I'd like to replace this character we have here, this Ethan character, which, you know, is a fairly decent detail, but it didn't come with any textures, so it's just kind of got this white look to it. Also, this futuristic getup he's wearing doesn't really fit the kind of scene that I'm making. So I'd like to have some other humanoid character to replace him. So for that, I'm going to go on, bring up my internet browser, and I'm going to type in Mixamo.com. This is a really awesome resource for humanoid characters. And you'll need to log in, which will involve creating an account, and it's been a while since I've done that, and I'm not going to run through that again. It's just your standard set up a username and password for a website service. It's, as far as I know, is entirely free for this. And now we're going to look through a whole series of characters and pick one that you like. And over here we'll show the preview of that character. So these are, right here, these are all just free characters that are available that other people have made. You can scroll through these and find one that you like. I kind of liked this character down here, Knight di Pellegrini. Seemed pretty fitting for the sort of scene that I was making, but feel free to pick any of these other ones. There's a whole nother page over here. And then we're going to download them. Now, just so you know, there's also a whole page for animations, and you can download animations along with characters or download them separately. For now, I think we're just going to use the animations that came with the standard assets, that walk, run, and jump, that's there already. That's all we really need, but know that there's tons of other animations in here that you can sort through. I think in a later video I might bring in some additional ones, like for a sword swing or something. Anyway, though, just have a character and no animations right now, and I'm going to click download. And then you go to this page for download settings. I don't know exactly the rationale for each of these options. I've found I've had the best luck when I select FBX for Unity and Original Pose, and then click download. Now, I've already done this, so I'm not going to download it again. I'll just look in my downloads folder, and so once you've downloaded your character, it should show up in your downloads folder, and now you'll just drag it in to your project files. And since we're going to be creating a number of different files for this character, I'm going to create a new folder. So that's right-clicking an empty space, right-click, create folder, and I'll just call this main character. Actually, let's call this character. Open that up. And then with that character folder open, I can just drag this knight model right in. And now it is here. Now, one thing I'm going to need to do this knight model right away is go into this. See, there's these tabs right here with rig selected, animation type, select humanoid, and then click apply. Your animations will not work unless it is set to humanoid. Humanoid setting makes a bunch of assumptions about how the character model is built, and it uses those assumptions to be able to use a common set of animations that are shared between all humanoid characters, which is really useful for making humanoid animations quickly, because animations are really difficult, so using stuff that's already been built is great. Generic doesn't make any assumptions, and therefore you can't use those common animation files, which is why it doesn't work. However, later on when we're creating animations for things like coins or doors opening, we will be using a generic setting, although we may not have to specify it explicitly. Alright, so there. Have that set, and now I can take this knight and drag it into my scene and put it inside of my third-person controller, like that. Okay, now it's looking a little big right now, so I'm going to drop down its scale by setting this to 0.75, 0.75, 0.75. So you can see it's about the same size as Ethan. I like Ethan's size. We're just replacing him. So now that this knight is in place, I can click on Ethan body, hold shift, click Ethan skeleton so that they're all selected, and untick it so that they are disabled. Eventually I'll delete them, but I want to make sure this is working before I get rid of something that was there before. Hit save. Now I'll just verify that our animations came in correctly, and no, they haven't. He's just stuck in this T-pose, and that's because I forgot something. The animator component of this model right here I need to set an animation controller to it. So so I just click on this little circle right here and look for third-person animator controller. So this is the same animation controller Ethan was using. Just select that, have it set there. Also, in our third-person controller, we need to set in this animator field, we need to set the Ethan avatar to this Knight di Pellegrini avatar that we just downloaded. Right there. So with those two settings, third-person controller, animator, use the Knight di Pellegrini avatar, which, by the way, is right here. So you could have opened this character model up and dragged it in that way if you didn't want to search for it there. And then also on the Knight, you find the animation controller. Now, if I hit play, now my Knight is running around and using the same animations that Ethan had access to, including the crouch and the jump and the stately walk, and the regular running and turning. Okay, but it still has this kind of white marbleish effect, and kind of the whole reason one of the main reasons we got this new model in was so that it would look better than that. Well, there's one more step that we need here. So in this character folder with the knight model selected, click over here in this Materials tab, and first click Extract Materials, and yes, it'll just bring up a folder. Just put it in the same folder as your character, so that came up automatically. Select, and now it creates this knight material right here, which is automatically assigned, if you look on the knight, is assigned right here. This is this knight material. But the material is still just a blank white. That's no good. So next I'm going to click Extract Textures and put it in the same place. And now these little drawings show up. Then I need to apply the texture to the material. Select the knight material, then click on the knight texture and drag it into this little square next to where it says albedo. This is how it reacts to light. Click that, and bang, you have your character model with some nice colors on it. And this is looking pretty good. We can actually make it look a little bit better if we apply a normal map. Because right now you'll see that all these ridges are just drawn on. It's like totally flat. And same with these. This kind of looks a little two-dimensional with these curves. We can do better. So for that, we're going to use this normal map, and first we need to set it up. So click on this knight normal.png, and under texture type, click the drop down and select normal map, and click apply. Then on the knight material, drag this normal map texture into this normal map field. And now, if you look closely at the scales, they look a little bit more three-dimensional. Same, even more so with these folds in the scarf. It kind of actually looks like there are folds and shadows, and it's still the same shape as it was. It just looks more three-dimensional because the light is reacting to it differently. Now we can, and I don't find this really helps all that much. There's also this texture right here. There's also this image file here for the knight specular. We can apply that by drag it with the knight material selected, dragging this into the metallic field. And now the knight is all super metal looking, and that looks kind of ridiculous, but we can just drag the smoothness field down, and this at 0 it'll look exactly the same as before, but we can drag it up a little bit, and it's kind of a trade-off. As we go higher up, these metal scales look nicer, like this really looks metal, but the face also looks glossy, which is just weird. So I find around 0.25 is a fairly good compromise. There's a little bit of glossiness to the skin, but it doesn't look terrible, and the metal looks a little bit more metallic. And yeah, metallic alpha, you can just leave that set as it is. Okay, so now we have our main character. It should move around just as before, walking, running, jumping, crouching with M, and we're good. Also, you may notice that if I run into a tree, it'll be blocked by it, and if it hits like the edge of a tree, it'll try to run up the tree. One other thing I'd like to demonstrate is, look at this water over here. I can currently just run right into the water, and my character isn't going to drown because I haven't programmed that explicitly. But one thing, you'll see if I go towards some ridge like this one right here and I run into it, character will get stuck, and I'll try to climb up it, but it can't because it's too steep. And that's good. It's actually, I'd like to keep that. However, on the other hand, I would also like to prevent the character from jumping off of a ledge, like that. Maybe allow him to run in if there's a very shallow slope, but to block the character from just falling into the lake when they're running around. And maybe you want to allow that, but I would like to prevent that from happening, just to make the game a little bit more playable, to kind of make this river more of an impassable area, rather than just something that you can walk right into, especially as there's nothing keeping the player from drowning. I think it's kind of immersion breaking, just having the character running around on the bottom of the lake. So to prevent the character from getting there, I'm going to, in my terrain, actually, I can put this anywhere, I just, for the sake of things being organized, I take my water and put it inside my terrain, so that way they're not cluttering up my hierarchy. And then, also in the terrain, I'm going to create empty, and I'm going to call this river colliders. Again, this is just for organization. And then inside the river colliders, we create a 3D object cube, and bring this up to where I can see it. Next, I'm going to make it considerably bigger. So let's say I'll make it 50 wide and 10 high and maybe 5 deep. That's good enough. I can also rotate it so that it follows the river and move it inwards a little bit. Okay, so it's nice and blocking the river right there. Maybe rotate it a bit more. Alright, that should be good enough. Now this cube automatically comes with a mesh filter that stores the vertices of all the little corner points, a mesh renderer that causes the whole thing to be drawn, and a box collider that prevents things from moving through it. So if I run this right now, I can take my character and let's see, if I turn towards here and I try to run into the collider, he stops, which is just what I want to prevent the character from running into the river. Also, so I can test this faster, I'm going to turn my character around. Alright. Now, I don't want to see this big, ugly white cube, so I'll just untick the mesh renderer box, and it's still there. The collider's right where it was, but I can't see it anymore. So now it's, when I play the game, it's just this invisible wall. And I run into it, and my character can't move forward any further, and they're just blocked. So now this river, or at least this portion of the river anyway, has become impassable. Now I could remove the mesh renderer entirely by clicking the gear icon and remove component, and then I'd want to get rid of the mesh filter as well. But I actually kind of like having these mesh renderers around, so when I'm placing things, it's nice for them to be there, as it's easier to see where they are as you move and manipulate them around, and then just untick them whenever you have them where you want, so that they become invisible. Now, as I want to make more of the river impassable, I just click on that cube and press Control D. I'm going to reactivate the mesh renderer on both of them, and take this cube and I'm just drag it over to another part of the river. And I can make these as big or as small as I like, depending on how fine-grained I want to control all of this. So, well, I think that's good there. And maybe, actually, that's good enough for now. Click both of these. So click one, and press either Control to select things individually, or Shift to select everything in between. Whoa. Okay, and then untick the mesh renderers to make them invisible. Now, one nice thing about having all of these river colliders underneath a single parent object is if I want to see where all of them are at once, I can just click this and I see the boundaries for each of them. whereas if I click on one or the other, then I can't see the one that I don't have selected. Clicking the parent lets me to see all of them. So placing these river colliders all the way along the river could be a kind of a tedious process, so I'll just leave that to the viewer if you want to do that. If you'd like to have some particular area, like say this shallow slope right here, not have a collider, so that the character can walk and approach the river at this particular location, then you just leave the collider out at that point. Just looking at one more thing in the character, in the standard assets characters, third-person character prefab, may have noticed when we picked out this third-person controller, there was another option for a AI third-person controller prefab. Let's take a quick look at what this does. So I can bring this into the scene, and oh, and they are off somewhere else entirely. So let's just put them under here, set its position to 0, 0, 0, 0, move them back out, and movement, and oh, right, and move them back out, put them over here, and this works very similar to a third-person controller, except instead of having a user control script, it has a NavMesh agent and an AI character control. Now, I think if I run this right now, it's going to get a bunch of errors, like lots of them. That's because there's an error that's occurring in an update loop. So let's fix those. Right now, this AI third person, one of the features that comes with this built-in AI character controller is pathfinding. So there's all these barriers, like these trees that we saw earlier that the character was running into. AI characters are able to navigate around them. And the way they do that is with this NavMesh agent. But for this to work, it needs to know what parts of the ground are navigable and what are not. And it's not able to determine that just from colliders alone. There's one more step that is required, and that is a NavMesh. So to create that, go into Window and AI Navigation. And this brings up a little navigation window right here. And there's a lot of settings that we could deal with on this, but I'm just going to leave everything at the defaults and click on Bake, and just leave this as it is. Press the Bake button, and there's going to be a little delay right here as it's exporting tiles and calculating out a NavMesh. I'm leaving the Show NavMesh ticked so we can see the results when this is finished. Okay, and then once that bar is complete, we see this blue stuff all over the place. And this is our NavMesh. This is showing the blue areas are where a AI-controlled character with a NavMesh agent on it can validly go, and the areas that are not blue are barriers, places that it can't cross over. And you may notice that it's already automatically blocked from jumping off of cliffs because it's anything steeper than a 45-degree angle is considered not navigable, and so it needs to find a path around. If you wanted to change the steepness that makes something navigable or not, then you just change this number and then rebake. Alright, so now that NavMesh is present, and if this blue stuff is annoying, I can just untick that Show NavMesh, but I'll leave it on. Now if I run the game again, those errors are gone, but the AI character is just standing there. And that is because, if I switch back to this Inspector tab, with the AI third-person controller selected, it does not have a target. So, for that, to make it follow the player, actually, before I have it follow the player, I'm just going to demonstrate something. If I create an empty, and I'm going to call this target, so create an empty game object, then select it, hit F2 to rename it, call it target. I'll bring it up here. Select my AI third-person controller, drag the target into here. Let's see, where is my target anyway? Well, that's fine. I'll just bring it down a little closer to the ground. Now if I hit play, just saw that Ethan character run over here. Now if I select this target, I'm in the scene view so I can move things around easily. If I move this target around, Ethan will run to approach wherever that target is. So if you want your AI character to go to a specific place, you can just attach this NavMesh to it and set a target, which is its destination, and move the target around wherever you want it to go. You can also, instead of having an empty target game object, you could also bring in the third-person controller of your player. And now, if I hit play, Ethan will run over to the player and start pushing me. And when I move around, Ethan will continuously follow me, no matter where I go. Now, one annoying behavior with this is when he gets close, he's just going to keep walking and pushing my character forwards. The reason for that is there is a setting. Yes, in the NavMesh Agent, stopping distance is 0.2. That's not nearly enough. I'm going to set this to 2. And now, when I hit play, now Ethan will stop at a distance of 2 from my main character. And as I run around, he'll follow, and then stop whenever he gets close. So now it's respecting my personal boundaries a little better, which I appreciate. And if I can duck through trees, he'll also automatically avoid them. Now this Ethan character is looking a little bit out of place, and I can replace him with the same model that I was using for the player, if I like, or I could download another model from Mixamo and replace him with that. It's the same process, but once I have the model that I want, I can just click on that and press Control-D to make a duplicate of it. Oh, also I'll need to unpack this AI third-person controller prefab so I can mess around with it. Bring in this Knight de Pellegrini into there, and set its position and rotation to 0. Leave the scale at 0.75. And now I can disable all of these. And this AI third person is going to need the Knight de Pellegrini avatar. So this top level has the Knight avatar, and the Knight has that same avatar and the third person animator controller in there. And so now, when I run the scene, now I'm followed by another Knight that is kind of a clone of myself. Lastly, is just a little bit of cleanup. Now that these Knight models are working pretty well, if I replace them with something else, it's not going to be with Ethan, so I'm going to delete those from the scene. Click Ethan body, Control, to click these other two, and get rid of those, just to have less excess stuff in my scene. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.